The masked text box control allows you to accept or reject user input based on a template that you define. You indicate what you will accept in each character position within the control. The mask property is the most important property because it contains the mask that determines what is valid input. To use the masked text box control, you'll set the mask property, the user inputs text. You can retrieve the text property, which may contain just text, text and a prompt, or text, prompt, and mask characters, depending on how you set up the settings of the control. Some sample masks look like these. This, for example, represents a United States phone number with an optional area code. This represents a United States zip code with an optional 4-digit tag on the zip code. This represents a Canadian postal code, such as L4B space 1B4. This represents a currency value between 0 and 999,999. That is almost $1 million. The currency symbol, the thousands character, and the decimal point would be replaced at runtime with their culture-specific replacements. This represents a proper name between 2 and 12 characters long. The masked text box control supports the following mask characters. 0 represents a required digit, 9 is an optional digit or space, and a hash mark is an optional digit or space that allows a plus or minus. L is a required character, and it restricts input to ASCII characters. Question mark is an optional letter, and it restricts input to ASCII characters. Ampersand is a required character, but it combines with the ASCII-only property. If that property is set to true, this acts just like the L mask character, which means it only accepts ASCII characters. C is an optional character, and again, it allows any non-control character unless ASCII-only is set to true, and in that case, it behaves like a question mark. Uppercase A is an alphanumeric character that's optional, and again, if ASCII only is set to true, it only accepts ASCII characters. Lowercase a is an optional alphanumeric character, and it only accepts ASCII characters if the ASCII only property is set to true. We have placeholders, a decimal placeholder, a thousands placeholder, a time separator, and a date separator, and although you enter these mask characters, at runtime these are replaced by the local characters for thousands, decimal, time, and date separators. The $sign represents a currency symbol, although at runtime it's replaced by the current locale's currency symbol. We have special characters like shift down and shift up. The less than sign converts what follows to lowercase. The greater than sign converts what follows to uppercase. The vertical bar disables a previous shift up or down, and the backslash acts as an escape. So, for example, if you had backslash $, for example, if you had backslash in your mask, it would appear as a literal backslash in the output. All other characters act as literals. Anything else besides these characters, they just appear as themselves within the output of the masked text box control. Let's look at a demonstration that shows off various properties of working with the masked text box control. Our sample form allows you to play with just about every important property of the masked text box, which is shown here. For example, the prompt character. I can choose from any of these items here, and we'll change the character that prompts us in the masked text box. Right now, the mask is set to 999. 9 stands for an optional digit or space, followed by some numbers that are required. So if I enter a phone number here, like 555, 555, 1212, see, as I type, I'm not needing to type the parentheses or the hyphen. Those are supplied by the mask. And I'm backspacing one character at a time. The mask doesn't go away. Those stay in place. Let's play with ASCII only, for example. Let me turn that on and change our mask to 4 optional characters. We come here, and now, if ASCII only is on, I can only enter letters A through Z. I can enter those would work fine. Numbers work fine, but I can't enter anything that isn't an ASCII character. For example, if I try entering, let me turn the numlock on, Alt 246, it's just turned away. Can't enter it at all. If I turn ASCII only off, now come in here, Alt 246, and I get a non-ASCII character placed into my control. Beep on error would beep if an error occurs. You won't hear beep now, so I'll not test that, but you can try it on your computer. Hide prompt on leave makes it so that the prompt is only there if the control has the focus. The moment you leave, it hides the prompt. Reject input on first failure gets or sets a value indicating whether the parsing of user input should stop after the first invalid character is reached. It's really only valid if you paste input into the MaskedTextBox control. Let's try this. I'll set this to 99999, and I'll go in Notepad right now. And in Notepad, I'll put something in like AAAAA, something that clearly isn't valid because 9 requires a digit or a space. Let me select this and copy it to the clipboard. Go over here, and I'll try to paste it in. Now, with reject input on first failure set, we don't get anything at all. Now, it'll be easier to see this if we handle masked input rejected event, so you can see when it's rejected. Let me come here and try pasting it in. It's rejected at position 0. Done. We're gone. Let's uncheck this, clear this out, and paste again. This time, it rejected it for every character as it tried to paste it in. So you can see the difference between reject input on first failure and not having that on. Skip literals gets or sets a value that indicates how literals are handled. If we set it to true, we allow the user to re-enter the literals. If you choose false, you prevent the user from overwriting literal characters. For example, let me put the mask back the way it was. Easiest way to do that is just close this and reopen it. And now, if we have skip literals on, if I type an open parenthesis, it takes it just fine. Here we are, 555. I'll type the closing parenthesis and type 555. Let me type a hyphen here. Hyphen works fine. But let's turn that off and try again. Now if I type a parenthesis, nothing happens. If I type 555, it's accepted. I type the closing parenthesis, nothing happens. So you have to determine which is better for your environment. Use system password character allows us to override the behavior of the password char property where we could supply our own. If we use system password character, then we'll be using whatever Windows uses as its built-in password character. And for security purposes, if you're using this, cut and paste are disabled for the control. So you can't just paste stuff in, or worse, copy it out of the control while you're using a password character. Let's go on to other properties. Let me close this to reset it. Start back up again. The text mask format property gets or sets a value that indicates whether literals and or prompt characters are included in the text property of the control. Let me show you. If I come here and type a number like 555, 555, 1212, you see now because we're including literals, they show up in the text. If we exclude prompt and literals, now only the value comes back. If we include prompt, well, there are no prompt characters left. Let's remove some. There we go. The prompt is included. And if we include literals, then we see only the text, but we also see the literal characters, that is parentheses and hyphen. The cut copy mask format, let me clean this up again. The cut copy mask format property controls what happens when the users cut or copy text from the masked text box control. The property gets or sets a value that determines whether literals are copied in or out, much like this property did. So if I put in here 555, 555, 1212, and copy it, now we'll include the literals. Let me go to Notepad again. paste it in, I got the literals. Let's go back over to our example, change this to be exclude prompt and literals, do it again, I'll copy, come over here, and paste, and this time I didn't get the literals. So you can control then what users get when they copy from the masked text box control. You can control the insert key mode. You might want to determine how users insert text. And this value can be any one of the values you see here. Default honors the current insert key mode of the keyboard. If I choose insert, then we're always inserting new characters. If I choose overwrite, then we're always overwriting existing characters. Most likely you should leave this at default unless you have a reason to change it for some specific reason. The control raises a mask input rejected event, which tells us when the mask rejects input. Let me try this. I'm going to try typing in some characters here. I'll try 1, 2, 3, haven't been rejected yet, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Everything's fine so far. But now as I start typing, I pressed 2 characters the first time. That's why I got 2 entries there. As I start typing beyond the length of the characters, we get rejected at position 14. Let's try a different test. Let me clear this out, clear this out, and let's try typing letters. Right away, I get rejected at position 1 because I had a digit expected there. You can investigate the code if you're interested how this works, but at least it tells you at what point your input was rejected by the masked text box control. There are also a few status properties we can check. For example, is overwrite mode. If we're in is overwrite mode, that should be checked, and you can see that it is. I'm monitoring the state of this masked text box every time I change anything on the form or the user enters any data. Right now we are in overwrite mode. Let me try something else. I'm going to toggle the state of the insert key on my keyboard. Turn numlock off will help. And now, because I've toggled the state of my insert key, I'm in insert mode even though this is set to default. Toggle it back, and now we're out of overwrite mode again. There's a mask completed property. So once I've finished filling in the mask, that should become true. Also, when the mask is full, we get another property set for that. We've completed the mask or we've filled the mask. We have 2 separate properties that keep track of that information. Well, certainly the masked text box control isn't perfect. It doesn't provide all the features you'd like, but it's certainly a major step up from not having such a control. This control has a few odd wrinkles, and you may argue with it a bit as you try to use it. But if you need to control what the user enters, you'll find the availability of the rich mask property and the various properties and events of this control make it easier to rigidly control what a user enters into a text box. Most likely, the text box control will be adequate for most uses on your applications, but what if you need to allow users to use multiple fonts, font attributes, links embedded within text, or tables or colors or bullets within input within a text box? In that case, you need the rich text box control. The rich text box control provides editing features similar to those provided by WordPad or Microsoft Word in a more limited fashion. Actually, WordPad really is the rich text box control wrapped up in a form much like the one we're going to look at. The rich text box control stores its contents in RTF format, that is, rich text format. In our example, we'll save and load a rich text format file. Let's look at the sample form to see how it works. I'll load up the rich text box demonstration, and here you have our rich text box. I'll even open up an existing RTF file. Although it's not terribly exciting, it is rich text, but I can do some fun things like select a region and make it bold. I can change the font for that region. I can change the color for that region. There we go. Also, if I select text and I bring up the color dialog, if it can match the color, it does. The same for the font dialog. Here, if I select some text, bring up the font dialog box, it knows that I have bold 18-point text there. Notice that if I change the font here, it updates here as well. So there's some fancy stuff going on here. I can zoom to display the text larger if I like, or back to 100%. We can make things italic, underline. We can center a paragraph if we like. A few more tricks up our sleeves. We can copy things to the clipboard. We can then paste them back in. There we go. We should be able to undo and redo actions. Right now, we can undo the paste, and then we can redo the paste. Notice that this text changes as we work through the actions on the form. Well, let's see how the form is working here to interact with the rich text box control. Now, most of the code in this form, or a lot of the code, deals with file handling, which is really outside the scope of what we're trying to cover here. I'm going to focus on the features that deal with the rich text box control. If I look at the form's load event handler, you'll see there are a number of procedures we call to set things up. First of all, we force the combo box containing the zoom amounts to start at 100%. We have a procedure which adds all the fonts to the drop-down list of fonts. This just loops through all the available font families, adding each one in turn to the items collection of the font family toolstrip combo box. We also call the set title procedure. We'll call this often. The set title procedure sets the title of the form. If the modified property of the rich text box is true, we tack on a star on the name of the file that gets displayed at the top of the rich text box control. Then there's the handle selection procedure, which we'll call often. This one enables buttons depending on the selection length. The selection length property tells us how much is selected. If it's greater than 0, something is selected, and we enable various buttons. If there's not, we disable the buttons. The handle save buttons procedure, which we'll also call often, determines if the file has been modified, and if it has, enables or disables the correct buttons on the form. We also need to update the font info based on the current selection. This procedure gets called often. Notice that it calls the hookup font events and passes false. The reason is we're going to be setting values of combo boxes on the form. If you're setting values of a combo box, even if you do it programmatically, it trips the events of those combo boxes. I don't want the event code to run, because then we'd be doing all this recursive event handling stuff. So what we do is we turn off the event handlers on the combo box if I pass in false. Otherwise, we hook up the event handlers for those combo boxes. So we can turn off or turn on the event handlers for the two font combo boxes, these two, on the form. We want their events turned off while we're setting things up. How does the rich text box handle undo and redo? Very simple. If I go to the Edit menu and choose Undo, you'll see that we have a procedure called Undo of the rich text box. There's a Redo method of the rich text box. But how do we know what to display in the Edit menu? Well, in the drop-down opening event of that menu item, we check whether we can undo or can redo. Those are properties of the rich text box. We enable or disable menu items based on that information. We also want to put in text into the menu item so we can see what it is that you could undo. There's an undo action name and a redo action name. And if those are available to us, if we get something in those properties, then we can update the menu item to display that text. And we do that at the point we drop down the menu item. Working with the clipboard is simple also. If we look at the form, you'll see we have here cut, copy, and paste menu items. If I go to Cut, look at the Cut Selection method, all we're doing is calling the Cut method of the rich text box. Same for Copy. Paste works the same, except paste might fail because you might have something on the clipboard that's invalid for the rich text box. That would raise an exception. In that case, we catch the exception and display something to the user. On our form, you might want to choose a font. Attempting to choose a font displays the font dialog control, and we also want the font dialog to be initialized with the current selection font. So we check the selection font property of the rich text box to see if it's null or not. It'll be null if nothing is selected or if the selection contains multiple fonts. If the selection contains a single font, we can then take that font and apply it to the font dialog. We then show the dialog. If the user clicks OK, we take the font out of the dialog and put it back into the selection font. Now we've updated the rich text box. We haven't updated the menus, that is the combo boxes on the tool strip. And in that case, we call update font info, which you've already seen, which updates the two combo boxes on the tool strip. If you modify the font using one of these two combo boxes, however, you've got to do a little more effort, because in that case, there's no specific font to apply to the selection within the rich text box. Let's go look for that procedure. It is modify selection font. There it is. And here, we first take the selection font and store it into a variable. We have a lot of work to do to set up the font we want to create. And you can investigate this code if you care how it works. But the final point is, we need to create a new font object using the name and the size from those combo boxes, along with a style, a measurement, and a character set. We create our font, and we apply it to the selection font. We also need to set the focus back to the rich text box. The form also has buttons which toggle the bold, italic, and underlined state of the selection. For example, bold calls toggle format passing in the font style it wants to toggle. If I go to the definition, this procedure is actually quite short, but it does a lot. The selection font we retrieve from the text box, and if that's not null, then we can reset the selection font. And how we do it is create a new font based on the current font, and then we toggle a bit within the current style property of the font. These font styles we'll get are all just single bit values. We toggle the bit using the XOR operator. We could have done it the long way, but the XOR operator makes it very simple. That's the point of the XOR operator, is given an integer and a bit, you want to toggle the selected bit, and that will certainly toggle the bold, italic, or underlined bit within the style property of the font. Working with background and foreground colors is easy too. Here, to set the foreground color, we have code that calls set selection color. We go there. This just first of all retrieves the selection color from the currently selected text. If it's not empty, then we take that selection color and place it into the color of the color dialog. We show the dialog with that color selected if there was one. Let the user select a new one. If they click OK, we take the color and put it back into the selection color property of the rich text box. The background color works exactly the same way. Modifying alignment couldn't be easier. Here, if we want to center something, we have a procedure that does the work. We just set the selection alignment property to be the alignment you specify. Left, center, and right all call through this code. Working with zoom is handled from this combo box. Let's go look at the code, and let me search for the zoom. There it is. In the selected index changed event of that combo box, we retrieve the text of the combo box, remove the final %, parse it into a float value, take that float value, and divide by 100 to get the zoom factor property of the rich text box control. How about handling links? Well, the rich text box control handles links embedded within it, and you can follow the link. Here in the link clicked event of the rich text box control, I'm just making it easy on myself, and I'll do a process.start call to start this process running with this command line parameter, which is the URL you just clicked on. This allows us to browse to the link you selected and then clicked on within the rich text box control. And our final trick is, what happens if you select all? Well, that's easy too. There's a select all method of the rich text box control. Well, clearly, the rich text box control has a lot of features. The problem is none of them are exposed except through code. You'll have to write code if you want to be able to interact with the rich text box control in your applications.